Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. This is the Nidici XF3 version 2. Featuring iflight Tachyon 1108 6000 kV motors, HGLRC F428 flight stack, yes again, Eachine TX200 VTX with a real AC UX2 antenna. I flew with both the Gemfan 3035 props and the 3-inch Emax Avon props, and a Foxeer Predator micro camera. As I built mine, it weighs almost 115 grams. I'm getting about 135 millimeters motor post to motor post. Arms are 3 millimeters thick. Top plate's 2 millimeters. Bottom sandwich plate is also 2 millimeters. Top sandwich plate is also 2 millimeters. They changed the standoffs to 2 millimeter hardware. There's a slot to adjust your camera forward and backwards. They added a millimeter to the flight deck so that you can change the angle of your camera to anything you want. As we start this flight, you may not be able to see it there right before takeoff just because I trimmed things so close. But it is quite a windy day, so if you notice any anomalies, it's surely not pilot error, it's got to be all the wind. That's a joke, right? Okay. I wanted to do the voiceover a little bit on this one, mainly because I thought it was important for you to know how I felt about the flight characteristics of the machine. So we have those 1108 motors and they're 6000 kV, so that means 3S. But I was pleasantly surprised with the performance. The platform is pretty stable. That power loop that you saw, there's a little bit of a twitch there. That's the pilot, that's not the machine, because I do another one here in a minute, and it's a lot better. So don't pay attention to that one. Our flight times are about 2 minutes and 20 seconds on a 550 3S battery. That could vary depending upon the quality or use of your battery and the camera angle that you're flying at. The camera angle that I'm flying at on this one is right around 45 degrees. It might be 44, it might be 46. I didn't measure it out precisely. It's just a pretty close figure from eyeballing it through Betaflight. But I thought the platform was really stable, and that was something that my overall experience with this kind of surprised me, because I did the frame review for the original XF3, and the vendor wasn't necessarily happy with me. They kept sending me pictures about how, oh, you've got the camera wrong. And I'm like, no, I don't have the camera wrong. You've cut the frame wrong. And so after some back and forth, then things kind of went quiet. So when they came back to me about this one, about how it's new and updated, I was a little bit skeptical. And I'm pleasantly surprised. I'm happy that I went ahead and agreed to do another review for them on this machine, because I do enjoy it. I do have one special thing I want to show you after we get back to the desk. So if you're only interested in the flight video, I have one special little flight thing I want to show you. It's not really a positive, it's a negative, but it does kind of confirm something that NJ Tech had said, I think on one of his live streams. He was talking while I was chatting with him maybe a month or so ago. But anyways, so the machine flies great. I thought it was stable. It's not the fastest micro I've ever flown by any stretch. You can put other motors on it. You don't have to go with 1100 series motors. You can mount 12 millimeter motors on there just fine, so you can do a 1306 if that's where you're at, or some of the new 1206s or 1205s if they become available, all the way up to a 1400 series. But as you see there, we're getting low battery, so we're going to head back to the desk, and I'm going to cover that one thing I was teasing you about here just a minute ago. So I didn't cover everything in the flight video because it was relatively short. I didn't talk fast enough, but I'm going to go ahead and get right to that teaser. I originally had an XM on here, and you see now that I had an FrSky XM Plus, so it has the diversity. And I switched to that because originally I had an XM on there, and I had a crash, and I just fell out of the air. Basically, I fail-safed. You will notice in the OSD it does not say RX loss. At least I haven't seen it. If it flashes up there at all, I think it rearmed itself, but I didn't have control in time to recover. And that is a little bit of a proof of concept as far as the durability of the frame, because I just fell out of the air, went straight down on the camera, and I was a little bit surprised because I fully expected to see some camera damage, so it must not have come down in a way to where the camera struck the ground first. And as you see where I've got my camera position, that it does stick out there a bit, but we have that cut here to where you can slide it back if you choose to. But the reason why I show you that is it confirms something at least one time for me. I've used the FrSky XMs a lot because they're dirt cheap. They're like $9.50 or something like that. And at the distance I fly in my flyer environment, it hasn't been a problem. But NJ Tech had mentioned that he oftentimes gets fail-safes when he gets any object between the XM receiver and his radio. And I hadn't seen that yet. I'm not saying he's, not telling the truth or anything. It's just in my experience, I hadn't had that experience. I haven't had a fail-safe for quite a while. I think the last time I had a fail-safe, it was probably just an aftermarket cheap receiver, and it could have been damaged. Now, the XM that I had in there could have been damaged. I had pulled that one out of my bin and mounted it up, but I went ahead and pitched it. But I wanted to show that to you because if you do plan to fly with objects between you and your radio, whether it be a big thick tree full of vegetation or buildings or what have you, you should probably go to an XM Plus just like this. Spend the extra $5, $6 and get one of these. There's also the, the XSR, the new one, the micro, which I think that comes in around $30. So if you're going to really do some stuff that's going to require to be able to penetrate around or through buildings, what have you, to have that reliable link to your radio in the flying environment with objects between you, I would definitely suggest going to a receiver with diversity. But as far as my machine, I could have made some improvements. So you noticed in the quick roll that I used one of those eSheen TX200s, and I did that because the flight stack is fairly narrow, and you also can tell that I've got most of my components between the arms and the top plate, and then I have my battery. It goes right on top. And I was trying to get my weight to be as close as possible to the prop line, and that's why I did that. I am a little bit not used to having something above my camera. You didn't see it in the flight footage, maybe I'm showing it up there, where I go along the back stretch of the fence and then I get underneath the swing set, and I got it a little bit too close and my battery actually kind of clips the crossbar of the swing set, so that was a little bit of a unique experience. I think I could have made some adjustments as far as bringing the weight down on this. You can see back here, I've got a coil of wire back here that I could have definitely trimmed off. I could have come directly off my ESC over here, or you could even come straight up off your ESC if you've got the ability to, with your batteries, to get them through here. You want to have it secured in here somehow. You don't want the battery lead like coming out around here and then connecting to it to where this thing is able to move. You want to have that secured down. And this is close, but it's not a problem. I had it on a whole bunch of flights, not an issue. In the quick roll, I also talked about the 3-inch Avon props, and I like these props on the top end, but I didn't care for them as much on the bottom end, and that's why you see these props on here now. You sacrifice a little bit of that top end punch when you go to the 30-35 gem fan props versus these props. And also the motors ran a little bit warmer. Now that could be partially because I didn't completely retune it. Many of you have asked me to do a tuning video, and I am planning to do that. I've got some new motors, so I'm going to run through a couple of batteries and do a tuning video, and I'll do a voiceover for that. But I think these motors and this big inside paddle, or excuse me, these props and this big inside paddle may actually help to keep our high-performance micromotors a little bit cooler than a prop design in this way, where the airflow off the prop is much more even. This is all speculation. I don't know this to be the case, but I did notice that the props or the motors ran cooler when I ran these props. So if you build a machine, this machine or another machine, you may want to take a look at the Avon props if you're suffering from hot motors, which is a question I get consistently and often, is how to tune that out. And the short answer is you can't always tune out hot motors. If you're pushing motors hard, they're going to generate some heat, and hot is kind of a subjective thing. You kind of have to decide how hot is. Obviously, if you think your fingers are going to be burned, if you got to get those fingers right off of there because you're going to end up with a blister, you know, that white burn that you get on your skin when you touch something too hot, that's probably too hot. You're probably going to end up slipping a magnet or something like that, or burning a motor out. And that could be your tune. If that's the case, lower P's, lower D's, and see what you get. If you have a flight stack that includes a VTX, you can relocate everything below the bottom plate. I did not do that. You see here that my bottom plate is the actual bottom plate. You can move the arms and the sandwich plates below here, and you can then have enough space to where, say you wanted to get in a HD camera, and you're going to build one like mine, but you're going to put an HD camera in as that third plate, you can do that. You can also use a flight stack with a VTX right in there. I do suggest that you get that antenna out away from the stack. You wouldn't want to come out the back end, because when you turn it towards you, your battery's probably going to be blocking your reception. Also, I was pretty happy with the reception and using this antenna. It's my first time using this. I think it's an AXI antenna, isn't it? Correct me if I'm wrong, but UXII or UX2. I don't know. I just buy different stuff and I try it out. And I was pretty happy with that. It doesn't add much weight. It's got a connector on it that fits right on the TX200. 200 milliwatts, seems to run pretty good, pretty clean. There's a little bit of noise in the video. If you slow it down, you might be able to see in the fly footage how there's a little bit of wavy line, and it's just there even when your motors aren't running. That's probably from the VTX itself. It's probably not from actual noise, and you might be able to take care of that by putting a capacitor right over here. You can do that here or here. It really doesn't matter. Wherever you put a capacitor, that can help decrease the amount of noise that gets into your electronics. But yeah, I was pretty happy with this. Good revision, and this is probably one that I'm going to keep around and fly every once in a while. I think I'd have a hankering for this. You know, like I said during the flight video, in its current configuration, it's not a speed demon. It's not a top performer, with crazy amounts of thrust and ability to throw. It's just very stable and relatively easy to fly. It's a good mix, a good overall mix of a good platform and good performance. If you're interested in flying something like this, I'll include links down in the description. I'll try to find all the links to parts. I think they're still selling this F28 flight stack. Hopefully, I think all the other parts are readily available, and I know that this frame is available off of Amazon, so you can get that fairly quickly. Looks like the frame is coming in at around $27.55. Some of you have talked about how Nidici might be a reseller of iflight equipment, and I can't disagree with you there one bit, because every time they've contacted me, they've always wanted to send iflight motors as well, and they did send me these motors. We did see the 1108 5000 kV motors that I did some testing on 4S, so we just got a chance to see that. And the flight times weren't that different, oddly enough, between 4S and 3S, although I did not fly this on 4S. I thought the motors were pretty warm, and the performance was pretty good, and just wasn't a worthwhile venture. So I was pretty happy with how it was. I guess I should show you how I did my antennas if you're curious about this sort of stuff. So just a zip tie and some heat shrink. It doesn't have to be hunkered down. You just don't want it wobbling around in the wind. I did use a heat gun to twist and move up, and you might be wondering, why didn't you just, go through a void on the top plate? It's because I wanted to take the top plate off without having to redo my receiver. That would be one less thing I have to do in the case of removing my top plate. I think I have enough slack in my VTX line to where I can take the top plate off and set it slightly off to the side. So say if I want to try out some new motors, or I've got to get a new flight controller or ESC in there, I won't have to disassemble everything all the way down to the bare bones. So that's why I did that. And you can also see I just ran a zip tie around the middle here to strap my VTX down, and you might be able to see on the bottom here I used the button as part of my leverage to make sure that that doesn't wedge out. And then if we look at the top, I've got a little bit of foam tape kind of squirreled around my curvature of the antenna so that I have some distance, although it's very, very minor. I don't know if you can see it in there between my VTX and the carbon. I didn't want it sitting flush against it. And then finally, I just used another zip tie here around the end to make sure that my antenna didn't wobble around much. It's pretty good in place. We want to make sure all of our parts are secured down so that we don't have any excess vibration from anything that doesn't have to be vibrating getting into our flight controller and causing noise and tuning issues. Used our hockey tape that we found here about a month or two ago, I think it was. We finally, after all sorts of tries of finding different tape, this fabric tape, or some people are calling it hockey tape, works well. It's pretty cheap, and you get a roll of that, and you're probably good to go for a number of builds. Oh, I should mention that the top part of this, I don't think I have any pictures of it. Maybe I'll be able to find one off of Amazon or something like that. For some reason, and I don't know why this is, they cut down or part of the materials where the motors mount, to where you could, if you had a giant shaft motor that you're putting down here, like I've got one somewhere like this. These are some new Sunny Sky motors, and they've got a really big shaft. I had to bore it out on this frame here. But if you've got a really big shaft on the motors that you're wanting to try, it really shouldn't be an issue because they've bored that out already underneath. it's hard for me to describe. The screw holes where everything goes, it's been bored down a little bit. It's been cut, removed. It could be a negative as far as you're concerned, or it could be a positive. It really depends on your point of view. Again, I had multiple crashes and I didn't have any problems with anything falling apart. I did lose a screw. I can't remember if that's when I took off the top plate one of the times or if it vibrated loose. So you might want to tend to use some blue Loctite on your screws to make sure they stay down, because we're talking about metal screws and metal posts. I do wish the screws were slightly longer, because I do believe these standoffs are threaded all the way through. But what you get with the kit is sufficient. If you find it's not long enough for you, you know, buy a 2mm screw kit off of eBay and replace them. It won't cost you more than $5 or $6 for one of those screw kits. Yeah, pretty good performer. Nidici, good on you. I'm glad I got the opportunity to take another stab at this one, and I was pretty happy with how it performed. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Is this something that you're interested in? I think we also have the possibility, before we go, let's take a look at one thing. I think we also have the possibility of mounting, this is a mount for the Hawkeye Firefly action camera, I think is the name of it. It's that real small action camera, and it's pretty decent. And I've got a review video on that. You can see that right up here. Also link it down below. It's maybe a little bit easier to find that for later reference. But if we could slightly modify designs of something like this to where we could mount it down on the screw holes, I think that would be best. But if not, you could run some zip ties through there to secure this down. It is going to push your battery back a little bit. I tend to mount my battery to where the battery would come about here, a little bit of forward bias, because I fly forward most of the time. So I would have to shift the battery back just a bit in order to allow the action camera on top. We probably need to redesign this mount a little bit too, to where this area is kind of removed a little bit, so it would be shaped a little bit more like the top plate and a little bit less square like is here. So if one of you is a modeler and wants to take that on, it looks like it's about 27, maybe 28 millimeters from front to back. Front posts on center are probably 20 millimeters, and then the rear posts look like they're about 23 millimeters. So that would be the modification you would need to make to the current mount if you were to choose to take that on. And I'm not much of a modeler, so I'll throw that to you guys. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise about this frame and setup, please leave that in the section down below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.